experimentally?
Well, you seem pretty confident in it, so I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen. And if it does happen, I don't think that it could be gravity. It could be something else. You can't just assert that it's gravity.
What basis have you got?
You were doing so well there, Votan. You were doing so well there.
So you just simply, again, the only thing you've done so far is just to reject science. The only positive point you've made so far is about water not, how do we explain water clinging to the surface? It's the only claim you've made so
I have
far.
other claims also.
Well, the reason that we question things, when I always look at this way, when somebody says, hey, something's wrong, I like to know if they have an understanding of it. If somebody says atomic clocks don't work or that the theory behind it is wrong, I like to know if they have a basic understanding of the topic, right? And if Wotan is saying, hey, we can't trust atomic clocks to demonstrate relativity is correct, then I'm questioning if he's understanding how atomic clocks even work. I think that's a fair position to take on that.
But the hard thing is that we're talking about atomic clocks and not flat Earth. Like that's the what we have to take away from this, guys, is that he's anti-gravity. Like,
well, that's
Wotan,
why
I think
atomic clocks.
Say that you don't. About. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I don't think he can truly say that he is a flat earther because he doesn't have any evidence for being that. He just doesn't believe that gravity exists, ergo the everything else we know about.
Yeah, I don't know even how that follows. Gravity doesn't exist, ergo flat Earth. I don't know how that even follows.
There's photos of mountain ranges 275 miles away. The longest range photograph is over 200. I think it's 250, between 250 and 275 miles away.
Why do you want to talk about that? Let's talk about that.
The entire freaking mountain. It's absolutely impossible. You cannot.
You don't see the entire mountain range. Let's be true here. I mean, you're not going to see the base of every single ridge along. I mean, you're going to see the tops of it, of course.
Right. No, you see a lot more than what you should, because when you go to the Earth curve calculator on Metabunk on your website, you go to your website Metabunk and you put in the Earth curve calculator and you put in the distance, you put in the altitude.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not my website. Is it your
I know exactly what he's talking about.
Too, but
that's
I don't know that
website. That's the website that debunks flat Earth and 9/11 and all these other obvious conspiracies. Obviously,
that's right.
Okay. So you go on your website, you use your math, you put in the altitude, you put in the distance, you put in how much curvature you should see, how much should be obscured by the Earth. The entire mountain range should be completely obscured. You should never be able to see it.
God, I miss Debbie right now.
Any of it. Even if you see a little bit, even if you see the tops of it, it's still flat Earth.
Yeah, Wotan. Are you familiar with the concept of refraction?
Oh yeah. So the whole freaking mountain range comes into view because refraction. Refracts, and it makes
that's not what he said at all. That you're totally mischaracterizing what he said there, Votan. I mean, he just simply asked, "Do you know what refraction is?" That's all he said.
Yes, I do.
He just attributed to that as, oh, look what Rumpus has said about mountain range and refraction.
Okay. Right. Now, Rumpus, continue.
Okay, please. I've got something to show you, so I'd like to share my screen again.
Oh,
sorry about that. If whoever has let me just show you a little thing down here. If you can see that, right. So here, right. Let me just go down here. Sorry, that's taking a bit longer than I hoped to get down to the bit that I want to show you. Here's refract. Oh, here's an example. Yeah, so I could. Do I want to show you that? So here's what refraction does. You can see. There you go. That's what refraction can do for you. You can see that. Can you see that? That knife coming up and down.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Great. And this is what there's an angel, something called an artifice, which allows for refraction. And I explain here. I could go into details. I could quickly explain to you how refraction works. Actually, do you know what Snell's law is?
Snell's law.
Snell's law. Okay. Right. So you're familiar with, for instance, if you have a pencil in some water and it looks bent, and so that it actually looks as if it's been lifted up. Can you see this diagram? Do you accept this diagram is correct?
Yep.
Great. So you can see here that due to what Snell's law tells you how light behaves when it hits a medium boundary, and refraction is caused by the change of velocity of light, and it causes it to angle in this particular way, and that the way it behaves is defined by Snell's law, which is the change of velocity of the light is given by the sine of the incidence and a refracted ray, and the ratio of the sine of those angles is the change of velocity. So, but basically, here's the example. Here's we've got water down here, and that's what happens to the ray. It bends basically toward into the air. That's coming from water. That's going from a dense medium to a light medium. Now,
it's a ratio of the sine of the difference of theta, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So imagine now, here's the Earth, and it's surrounded by some glass, and here we have a lighthouse. I don't know if you can see that clearly. So if you imagine a light ray coming out of here at the base of the lighthouse, and it hits the boundary here. So this is just glass. So it's all the same. It's uniform. It's a homogeneous medium, and it hits there. Then it follows Snell's law, which means it bends. This angle of refraction here, following the Snell's law, what I've described here, which means it bends in this way. It bends towards the boundary. Here, this is where you measure the angles from. This is the angle of incidence. That's the angle of refraction. And my stupid thing's saving, which is very annoying. Now imagine that this was made of not just one layer. So this is the Earth I'm proposing here, and this is made up of many layers. Then you would get lots and lots of these refraction events. And if I could scroll my bloody thing, which I can't do because it's bloody saving, you would see that in fact you would get lots of these little bendings occurring at the various boundaries of the different. So imagine just being one layer. Imagine this is 5 layers of glass, each with different refractive index. As it hit each one, it would undergo each one of these bends. And if you had enough of those, it would actually bend all the way in a nice arc. And that's what the refraction things mentioned in the Metabunk thing is. And if you have intense conditions, which I'm trying to scroll to, but this bloody thing's decided to save, and while I'm doing this, you actually get things like mirages, and you get inversion layers, and you must accept the existence of mirages and those other things. And that particular phenomenon you're describing with that particular mountain is caused by, here we go, thank God for that, you bastard. So this is what happens if you have lots of these layers. You get lots of these little Snell refraction events occurring until eventually you get a nice little smooth ray that occurs. Now, if you get particular conditions where the density of these things is changing rather oddly, you can get those bends. And as you can see here, what's happened here is that you can then see, so this is what happens when you have what it looks like from the user's, from the observer's point of view. So here's an observer with an eye here, and here's our lighthouse. And the light coming from the base of this lighthouse comes around, it follows the arc that I've just described in the previous diagrams, and it hits the eye, say it's sort of horizontal. But in fact, the light actually followed an arc. But of course, the way you perceive things is you look at the straight line. So you perceive the base of the lighthouse here as being here and not here, because it's been bent round the thing. Now, this is under the normal conditions. This is caused by the fact that the density of the air is greater towards nearer the surface of the planet, which you've accepted, and less up, which means it follows the rules I set up here. These layers, the ones closer to the Earth, surface of the Earth, are more dense, and so it means that it will bend around in that way, which means it bends around the surface of the Earth, which means you can effectively see some degree. I mean, it's only slightly that. A diagram I showed you before about the curvature of the Earth, which you accept to look very much like a straight line. Similarly, these curves are almost straight, but of course I've exaggerated the scale here. And so you perceive things, you can see basically around the curve. And if the conditions are greater, for instance, if you get very warm air and a cold surface, you can get more extreme versions of this. And that the conditions you were talking about for seeing those mountains happen very unusually, and they are untypical environmental conditions, which means you can do things like see the sun. So for instance, this is where the sun, every time you see the sunset or sunrise, the sun is actually below the horizon when you first see it. You perceive it as being higher up, and in fact they adjust timeanddate.com to allow for this, because people will keep on saying, oh look, the sun went down below the horizon later than it should have done, and it rose earlier, and that's because the light going through the atmosphere is bent. And of course, you cannot. Here's an example, for instance, of bending refraction. So you can't deny that refraction occurs, because this is a particular.
I think we're kind of like harping through this point.
Okay, one last thing.
By this point, if he doesn't understand things like refraction, then
I understand.
Okay, one last thing.
This is not complex
one last
physics
thing
here.
Okay, yeah, one last thing. See, then you get effects like this, which demonstrate what weird things can do with refraction. So you can't necessarily assume. You cannot just say, oh look, therefore, because we have these strange effects, therefore that invalidates it. No, it's due to refractive conditions, and we do get strange refractive conditions just like this. There you go. End.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah. Right, so that's
it's Casey. I have a suggestion.
Come on.
Bring it.
Hi.
Hi.
How about we take this to a less scientific level, because it is quite evident that it's not being understood.
What? Who's not understanding it? Who's not understanding it?
Voton.
I'm understanding.
Votan.
You
So
guys
he's-
think like
he
I'm
claims
a
to be
brain dead
understanding it.
moron.
By
Like
the
I
way,
understand what he's saying.
We didn't say you were a moron. Voton.
Voton.
We did not
But
say
I
that.
just
No,
don't think
said
that this
you're
phenomenon
not.
can.
I just think it would be more beneficial for the conversation for us to keep this at a little bit of a less scientific and mathematical level and go with maybe simpler explanations. It would also be helpful if maybe we could ask some questions.
Hold on. Let her finish, and then we'll go to what you want to say about it. Go ahead, Casey.
Perhaps instead of trying to go into complex explanations and educate, how about we try to find out what he thinks and why, and then more simply explain why those things are incorrect. Would that be that might just be more beneficial to the conversation?
I would. I'm sorry. Rumpus is going to go next. My bad, Rumpus.
Well, I was just going to say, she seems to be saying concerned about Wotan's explanation. He claims to have understood what I just said. So the problem is not there, though the audience, I suspect, also probably understood what I said.
He says that he understood, but
I don't think he does. I mean, I was going to ask him, this photo is
we don't follow the
right? I don't think he understands why the ship, we see it the way we do from the Fata Morgana.
Well, yeah. I think that one of the bigger problems here, though, is that, at least in my view, Votan, no disrespect to you, but I feel like Votan is wanting this level of explanation for things, but at the same time, there is literally no criteria that would suffice to convince him otherwise, because he just you just reject science, because while you don't know, you still keep up this level of skepticism about what scientists tell you, regardless of what can actually be proven to you. Like, for instance, how does this refraction really affect your worldview? Like, how do you feel about, this information about refraction?
So this image that we're looking at right here with this boat is obviously not far enough to be behind the curve even with your mathematics. Now the mountain absolutely is. It would be completely obstructed by the curvature of the earth. And now what you're saying,
not with
this object, can I speak? This object that you're seeing is not behind the curve of the earth, even with your math. And this is happening. This is refraction. This is clear refraction, a mirage. I understand that. But now what you're saying that objects behind the curve can come up over the curve and appear just as if they're on the land.
That's
I'm sorry.
We have shown that as well.
Much. I like Occam's razor too much. What you're telling me right now, I
don't know Occam's razor.
I honestly think you're just completely full of shit, and I just don't. I don't believe this at all. I don't believe you at all.
I have pictures.
We have photos of that happening,
it's just way too much. It's just way too simple to just say that it's just on the horizon. That's where it is.
Well, I mean, that's not Occam's razor for one thing. Let's get that straight.
That's my point to him.
It is Occam's razor.
No. Hold on. Occam's razor is the solution with the least amount of assumptions.
Exactly.
Is more than likely going to be the correct one.
With all things being equal with explanatory power.
Right.
And he keeps forgetting that. He has to have two competing hypotheses that have equal explanatory and predictive power. Then you take the one with the least assumptions. He doesn't have anything with any explanatory power or predictive ability.
Right, exactly. So no, this is exactly Occam's razor, because you're saying they both have explanatory power.
I have figured it out.
I've got a picture I'd love to show to Wotan
explanatory power. Excuse me, can I just finish? They both have explanatory power, being that the Earth is flat and you see the whole mountain range because the Earth is flat and you can see it, or that it's refraction and it's bringing up the whole image and it's just a mirage. That is more assumptions. So
right, Wotan,
would you Occam's razor.
You're anti-fact.
Would you like to look at?
That's what it is. You're anti-fact.
Okay, I'd like to show Wotan this diagram here, which is something taken by Soundly. Some people may be familiar with. He takes shots across Lake Pontchartrain and things, and he particularly focuses on this hotel. And this is two shots that he made of the hotel. You can see it here and here. And this is the two different conditions that have actually caused this to see. This is what it normally looks like, and you can see you can't see much of it, but it's hidden behind the curve, of course. And this is, for instance, this picture in itself demonstrates the Earth is spherical, because, of course, where else else has that gone? And on a different night with different refractive conditions, this happens. So you can see there's been an enormous change in the visible portion of this hotel caused by